Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The house felt cavernous after David left, not just empty, but echoing with the silence he'd left behind. It had been 6 months, and while the initial shockwave had passed, the tremors still rattled me sometimes, especially in this big old house we bought together, filled with his projects, his plans, his ghost. One of those projects was the spare room upstairs. It was supposed to be his office, then a nursery that never happened, and finally, it just became the room where things went to be forgotten. The walls were a depressing shade of beige that had yellowed over time, marked with scuffs, and the ghosts of pictures long removed. I decided it needed life, color, a new beginning. Maybe I did too. I picked a vibrant, optimistic blue, the color of a summer sky just before sunset. Buying the paint, the rollers, the tape, that was the easy part. Staring at the bare, sad room, the Kens lined up against the wall like silent judges, that felt insurmountable. My daughter, Sarah, lived hours away, and my friends all had their own busy lives. I mentioned my painting project during a weekly call with my cousin, Linda. She immediately suggested her husband, Mark, could help. He's great at that stuff, Emily, she'd insisted. Really, he enjoys it. He just finished remodeling our kitchen, practically rebuilt it himself. I hesitated. Mark? I liked Mark well enough. He was quiet, steady, a good guy. We saw them maybe twice a year, holidays mostly. Pleasantries, small talk about weather and jobs. He was Linda's husband, a fixture in the background of family gatherings, usually found nursing a beer and talking tools with the other guys. The idea of spending a whole day, maybe 2, alone with him in the intimate space of my home felt odd, intrusive almost, but Linda was insistent. And honestly, the thought of tackling that room alone was overwhelming. Okay, I'd finally relented, if he's really sure he doesn't mind. Mark called the next evening. His voice, deeper than I remembered, was polite, almost formal. Linda said you needed a hand painting? Yes, Mark, that's so kind of you to offer. But please, don't feel obligated. No, happy to help. Keeps me out of trouble. He chuckled lightly. How's Saturday look for you? I can come by mid-morning. And so, Saturday arrived, bringing with it a surprising wave of anxiety. I tidied the house obsessively, brewed coffee I wasn't sure he'd drink, and changed my outfit 3 times before settling on old jeans and a paint-splattered t-shirt I'd owned since college. What were we even going to talk about for hours? The doorbell rang precisely at 10. Mark stood on the porch carrying a canvas drop cloth and a toolbox that looked like it held the secrets to the universe. He wasn't wearing his usual holiday polo shirt, but a faded blue work shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms lightly dusted with sawdust. He looked different out of the context of family dinners. More solid, more capable. Morning, Emily, he smiled, a genuine, warm smile that eased some of my apprehension. Smells like coffee. It is, I smiled back, stepping aside. Come on in. The patient is upstairs. I led him up to the spare room. He surveyed it silently for a moment, hands on his hips. Good-sized room. That blue will look great in here. Lots of light. He didn't comment on the emptiness, the lingering sadness I felt clung to the walls. He just focused on the task. We spent the first hour in comfortable, companionable silence, prepping the room. He showed me how to tape the edges with painter's precision, a trick involving a putty knife I'd never known. He laid out the drop cloths with an efficiency that spoke of long practice. There was a quiet competence about him that was strangely calming. I found myself relaxing, the anxiety melting away like the morning mist outside. He didn't pry or ask awkward questions about David. He just worked, steady and focused. Finally, he popped the lid off the first can of blue paint. Right then, he said, handing me a roller, ready to make a mess. The first stroke of vibrant blue against the tired beige was startlingly satisfying. It felt like an act of defiance, a reclaiming of space. Mark worked with an easy rhythm, his movements economical and sure. He didn't chat idly, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was a working silence, punctuated by the rhythmic swish of rollers, the occasional clink of a paint can, or a soft instruction. Little lighter pressure around the edges, he'd murmur, or make sure you feather that out. I found myself watching his hands sometimes. They were capable hands, callous from work, but gentle as he guided my roller stroke once or twice. There was an unexpected grace in his movements. Around noon, I suggested a break for lunch. I'd made simple sandwiches and iced tea. We sat on the back porch, the scent of cut grass and honeysuckle in the air. The awkwardness I'd feared never materialized. Instead, we talked easily, not about David, not directly, but we talked about houses, the joys and frustrations of owning older homes. He told me about the nightmare of finding hidden plumbing issues in their kitchen remodel, mimicking Linda's exasperated sighs with surprising accuracy, making me laugh. I told him about the leaky faucet in my bathroom that I kept meaning to fix, and he immediately offered practical advice, sketching a diagram on a napkin. He asked about Sarah, remembering she was studying environmental science. He seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about her research. I realized I knew very little about his kids beyond their names and ages. He spoke about them with quiet pride, a softness entering his voice. There was a gentleness to him I hadn't noticed before, hidden beneath his reserved exterior. As we went back to painting, the conversation continued, meandering like a slow river. We discovered a shared love for old blues music, debating the merits of Muddy Waters versus Howlin' Wolf. He talked about his high school band, a detail Linda had never mentioned, a sheepish grin spreading across his face as he described their one and only disastrous gig. I shared my own long-abandoned dream of opening a small bookstore cafe. Things I hadn't thought about, let alone voiced, in years. He listened intently, nodding, asking questions that showed he was actually hearing me. It felt good, easy, like talking to an old friend, though we were practically strangers just hours before. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. The room was transforming, bathed in the cheerful blue. It felt lighter, hopeful. Mark was working near the window, carefully cutting in the edges with a small brush. The sunlight caught the flecks of silver in his hair, the lines etched around his eyes. He looked up and caught me watching him. I flushed, quickly looking back at the wall I was painting, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the situation. Just the two of us, shut away from the world, sharing this task, these quiet revelations. He didn't say anything, just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, and went back to his meticulous work. But something had shifted. A subtle awareness had entered the room, a low hum beneath the surface of our easy companionship. It wasn't uncomfortable, not exactly. It was just there. A recognition of shared humanity, perhaps a connection forged in paint fumes and quiet conversation. We worked until the late afternoon light began to fade, the first coat complete. The room looked amazing, vibrant, and alive. We stood side by side, surveying our work, a shared sense of accomplishment washing over us. "Not bad," he said, his voice softer now. "Not bad at all." "It's wonderful, Mark," I replied, meaning more than just the paint. "Thank you." I couldn't have done this alone. He looked at me, then, his gaze direct and thoughtful. Everyone needs a hand sometimes, Emily. The second day felt different from the start. The initial unfamiliarity was gone, replaced by the comfortable rhythm we'd established. Mark arrived with donuts and coffee, remembering I took mine black. We didn't need to discuss the plan. We just fell into it, taping off for the trim, laying down fresh cloths. The conversation picked up where it left off, easily, naturally. We were applying the second coat of blue, the color deepening into a rich, velvety hue. Mark was on a small stepladder, carefully painting the strip above the window frame, while I worked on the opposite wall. We were talking about travel, places we'd dreamed of going. I mentioned wanting to see the coast of Maine, the rugged cliffs, and lighthouses. I went there once, Mark said, pausing his brushstroke. Just after high school with my dad. He loved sailing. He rarely mentioned his father, who had passed away years ago. Linda had said it was a difficult relationship. Was it a good trip? I asked gently. He was silent for a moment, looking out the window, though seeing something far away. It was complicated, he finally said, his voice low. My dad was a hard man, not unkind, but demanding, expected a lot. That trip, it was the first time I felt like maybe he saw me. Not just his son, but me. He turned back, meeting my eyes. There was a vulnerability in his expression that took my breath away. We were fixing a sail together. It had ripped in a squall, and he just started talking about his own father, things he'd never said before, regrets he had. He stopped, cleared his throat. It was just a moment, but it changed things between us. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, holding his gaze, trying to convey understanding. The air in the room felt thick with unspoken emotion. My own relationship with my father had been loving but distant. We'd never shared that kind of breakthrough. I felt a pang of empathy for the young man Mark must have been yearning for connection. I decided to share something equally personal. My mother, I began, my voice a little unsteady. She collected teacups, tiny, delicate things. After she died, I found a hidden box filled with letters. Letters she'd written to me, but never sent, about her fears, her hopes for me, things she could never say face to face. Mark came down from the stepladder, setting his brush carefully on the edge of the paint tray. He leaned against the wall near me, listening intently, reading them. I continued. It was like meeting her all over again, seeing the woman behind the mother. He nodded slowly. It's strange, isn't it? How the people closest to us can still feel like strangers sometimes. We stood there for a long moment, the silence stretching, filled not with awkwardness, but with a profound, shared understanding. The space between us seemed to shrink, charged with an unexpected intimacy. It wasn't romantic, not sexual. It was deeper, more fundamental, a connection forged in shared vulnerability, in the quiet acknowledgement of life's complexities and the hidden depths within the people we think we know. He reached out, not to touch me, but gestured towards the wall I'd been painting. You missed a spot, he said softly, a small smile playing on his lips, breaking the intensity. I looked, and sure enough, there was a faint patch of beige showing through the blue. I laughed, a release of tension. Guess I got distracted. Happens, he said, picking up his brush again. But the moment lingered. The shared confidence, the glimpse behind the curtain each of us had offered the other. It hung in the air, shimmering like the dust motes in the sunlight, changing the atmosphere of the room, changing the dynamic between us into something quieter, deeper, and unexpectedly resonant. We finished the trim in a comfortable quiet, the earlier intensity softening into a warm camaraderie. The emotional peak had passed, leaving behind a sense of closeness, of having navigated something significant together. Cleaning up felt like the gentle unwinding after the main event. We worked together seamlessly, rolling up the drop cloths, sealing the paint cans, washing brushes in the utility sink downstairs. The conversation was lighter now, easy banter about whose painting technique was superior, mock arguments over the best way to clean rollers. But underneath the lightness, the resonance of that shared moment of vulnerability remained. Mark packed his tools methodically, wiping each one clean before placing it in the sturdy toolbox. I gathered the empty donut box and coffee cups, standing in the newly painted room, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun filtering through the clean windows, felt like standing inside a promise. The blue was perfect, calm, deep, and full of possibility. It was more than just a painted room. It felt like a space reclaimed, not just from neglect, but from sadness. "It looks incredible, Mark," I said, truly grateful. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." He closed his toolbox with a quiet click. "It was my pleasure, Emily. Seriously, it was nice." He looked around the room, then back at me. "It's a good color. Feels hopeful." Hopeful. That was the word. He'd helped bring hope back into this room, into this house, and maybe into me as well. We walked downstairs and stood by the front door. The awkwardness I'd initially dreaded felt like a distant memory. In its place was a quiet respect, a warmth that felt earned and genuine. "Linda will be thrilled we didn't kill each other," I joked. He chuckled, a rich, easy sound. "Nah, we make a good team." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Listen, Emily, about earlier. Thanks for, listening." "Thank you too, Mark," I replied softly, "for sharing." There was a moment of hesitation, a look that passed between us, an acknowledgement of the unexpected depth we'd found in each other, a silent promise to respect that boundary and the context of our connection, rooted in family and friendship. It was a connection I hadn't anticipated, born from the simple act of painting a room, but it felt significant. He gave a final nod, a small smile, and then he was gone, his truck pulling away from the curb. I closed the door and leaned against it, the scent of fresh paint filling the hallway. The house didn't feel quite so empty anymore. The silence wasn't echoing. It felt peaceful. The experience hadn't been what I expected. There was no dramatic, unbelievable event in the way sensational stories often portray. The unbelievable part wasn't about scandal or forbidden actions. It was about the surprise of forging such a deep, genuine, and entirely respectful emotional connection with someone I barely knew, someone who was simply my cousin's husband. It was about the discovery that vulnerability could be shared safely, that understanding could blossom in the quiet spaces of a shared task. It was about seeing someone, and perhaps being seen myself, in a new and unexpected light. I walked back upstairs and stood in the doorway of the blue room. It felt like mine now, a space not defined by loss, but by the quiet strength of renewal, the unexpected gift of connection, and the subtle, surprising ways life could unfold when you simply open the door and let someone in to help you paint. It was a reminder that meaningful connections can arise in the most unexpected circumstances, built on mutual respect and the quiet courage to be vulnerable. And sometimes that's the most unbelievable thing of all.